Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ethereum Core Developer Meeting number 97. I'm your host, Hudson, and we'll get started with agenda item number 1A. This is an update to EIP 1559, the fee market change for the Ethereum 1.0 chain. This is going to be from Tim, who left a comment that's linked in the agenda. By the way, I updated the agenda like 7 minutes ago, so refresh the page if you have an old copy of it. So Tim, go right ahead into the update and major questions.
Sure. Thanks, Hudson. So just to give a quick background on 1559, I think a lot of folks are probably very familiar with it. It's a proposal to change the Ethereum fee market. So it has a couple nice properties. The first is that it hard codes the transaction fee in the blocks. So it makes it easier to query what the right fee should be for a transaction. And the second is that it burns part of the transaction fees in each transaction, which creates a nice kind of feedback loop between the usage on Ethereum and the amount of fees that is burned. So a lot of people are in favor of it because of that. And it can also help potentially mitigate against some attacks where when the fees become much higher than the block reward, then miners have an incentive to reorg. So all this to say, like a lot of different folks have been interested in this EAP for a long time, and on the Besu team, we started somewhat championing it again earlier this summer. So right now, both us and the Vulcanized team have been working on implementations of the EAP, and Nethermind just joined this week. I believe they're syncing our little testnet that we have at the moment. So I guess I just wanted to give this quick update. I linked a more detailed one on the All-Core Devs agenda if people want to read that. And when I was reading through the previous discussions on All-Core Devs, the biggest reason why people were reluctant to include this EAP was the potential denial of service risk on mainnet. So this EAP achieves a lot of its goals by creating, by essentially doubling the block gas limits and aiming to keep your average block only 50% full. But it's possible to fill those blocks if you pay enough. So that means that we're effectively increasing the block size in the worst case by a factor of 2. So I guess first of all, I just wanted to ask, do people see other major risks or have other major concerns with this EAP? The potential risks of having twice the block size is something we're definitely looking into. But I'm curious, I just wanted to see, first off, if anybody had other major objections or just general thoughts they wanted to share about it.
Okay, do we have anybody?
Can I volunteer Martin?
Only if he wants to go.
Yeah, well, the problems that we see with 1559 is about denial of service. Aside from that, there are basically no big issues we see with it, but it's a bit unclear whether the motivators are this being mainly a UX benefit or if it is about the whole value proposition of doing reorgs and having a value. I mean, if the miner revenue stems from transaction or does it stem from mining rewards, and how does that affect the security? If it makes sense for miners, if miners get a larger incentive to reorg to get highly valuable blocks, whereas currently it doesn't really make sense to keep mining on this block or that block, or it doesn't make sense to mine on an old block because they're all about equally worthwhile. So there are, But it's mainly the denial service, potential denial service that issues that can be exacerbated if the block gas limit can be raised to X.
Anybody have any insight on that they can provide? I know that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So
I was gonna say, I think, yeah, for those types of security concerns, I'm happy to just ping people and follow up offline. So I think that's, to me, that's fine, and we already had kind of an understanding of those. I think it's mostly if people have other concerns that they'd want to raise, that'd be good to discuss, and also I guess to get a feel for maybe folks like James around like what type of testing and whatnot they would want to see for a NEEP like this before it went into something like it won't be into Berlin, but like a YOLO network for whenever the next upgrade is. Yeah, that would also be very valuable.
I'd also like to know if the denial of service worries people have are from the theoretical standpoint of just too many blocks taking too long, or if it's more from a kind of practical implementation standpoint of what happens to the existing clients if they have to handle so many big blocks in sequence. Because right now I don't see the issue as is with the theory of it, because doesn't the base fee just increase and render each block harder and harder to fill for denial of service purposes?
Yes, but even if the base fee increases, there's blocks are not that expensive to fill. So it's like, and I think over I call it whatever, like 30 to 60 minutes, it would become much too expensive much more expensive than say 51% attacking Ethereum. But you could still get like a short, call it 15 to 30 minutes filling of blocks at a reasonable price, if you want.
I'm curious, so Nethermind's sort of starting to gear up to work more on 1559, and has you guys have sort of started looking at it? Is there something that has stood out from your team? Thomas, if you're here.
Yeah, I can hear. So interestingly, I was looking at this potential denial of service attack before, like when I was analyzing just the AP on paper, the TRE behind it. And I discussed that with a few people, and I think we quickly realized that after you calculate the cost of attack, then it's not that serious. For example, like with the current gas prices, it would be immediately more costly than 51% attack. I think what I saw as a potential threat was that this kind of attack, you don't need to have the infrastructure in place. So you can be a minority miner and start doing that to some extent by just filling your blocks always. But it wasn't that critical after we analyzed that further. So I almost felt like, okay, I was overexcited about finding some problem, and then everyone analyzed it quickly and they said, okay, it's not a problem.
Yeah, I don't know if I follow the reasoning, but maybe we could just take that offline. So I'm not sure I understood what you meant.
Okay. Also, and pardon me if you mentioned this already, Tim, but I think there's like a formal analysis by Tim Rothgarden to see, and I think that might cover part of this. Would that be right, Tim?
So yes, there is a formal analysis by Tim Rothgarden, but no, I don't think it'll cover that. So the goal of Tim's analysis is more around just like the game theoretic properties of the EAP. So basically, if we implement this, do we actually end up in a spot where the fee market is more efficient? But I don't think he might consider some sort of potential attack scenarios, but he's definitely not looking at it from like a network security perspective first.
Got it. Got it. Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this? All right, thanks, Tim. We have some follow-up to do offline on this, and we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
Um, the next, or is
It
There's
that
one
might
more
be
thing
a,
on.
Oh,
oh, Micah, did you have something?
I think, I think there's one more thing on the EIP 1559 agenda, isn't there, Tim?
oh yeah. So Micah, I guess your PR around merging the two transaction pools. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah, are we good to go on that?
I guess yeah. I'd be curious to ask. Yeah, Thomas. I think Thomas is the only person on the call right now who's actually working on the implementation. So I, yeah, I feel like we might want to also just ask afterwards in the Discord channel we have, because there's
Yep.
more implementers there. But yeah, I'm curious, Thomas, if you have any thoughts on that, like the merging of the two transaction pools and the sort of conversion of legacy transactions to 1559 transactions.
Yeah, I like this idea because it was very natural for me to start looking at the legacy transactions as the EIP 1559 transactions with particular properties set in a way that represents the meaning of the legacy transaction. It was very natural, and all the code works nicely this way. You literally just set the premium to be gas price, and the base and the fee cap is gas price as well on the transaction, and then it's exactly the same behavior, almost like you said the premium on the new transaction to be the gas price minus the base fee, and that's it. And it just works out of the box, I think. I really like this.
I was also in favor, and I guess the only concern I potentially have is, are there cases where some transactions can't be converted for a reason or another? Yeah, but maybe that's something that's easier to follow up on offline as well.
it may be good to have an EIP, not update. What is the breakout room?
There's an implementers call next Thursday. So next Thursday, same time as all core devs, basically 6 days from now, we have an EIP 1559 call scheduled already. So I'm happy. Yeah.
And there's 2 chat rooms in ETH-R&D Discord already for it.
Yeah. So I'll post the link to the call in the Zoom chat here, if anyone wants to come. But I think, yeah, maybe these issues are easier to flesh out there and over the Discord in the meantime.
Great. Anybody else?
I just want to say that EIP 1559 is like so non-invasive that it can be even like we're thinking of merging it to master and leaving as a switch in configuration. Like on the implementation side, it's really not much change.
Okay.
That's. I'd love to look at the PR. It's surprising just because I looked at the diff on the guest PR recently, and it was huge.
No, it took just a few hours and wrote like 100 lines.
Nice.
Okay.
Congrats.
Yeah. Okay, I think the next item is EIP 2938 account abstraction. I think Ensgar's here to talk about a summary of the discussion over the last few weeks and get opinions about moving to CFI for after Berlin.
Yeah, exactly. Hi everyone. Yeah, so just a brief update. We've been obviously talking about account abstraction since we published the EIP a few weeks ago, and last 2 weeks since last call, there was quite a bit of feedback. In general, it seems like a lot of people were pointing out that basically because we have this design where the consensus changes would be quite minimal, and then you could basically in the mempool we would have iterative versions that would add more and more advanced support for AA. And the EIP itself only fully specifies the smallest of these versions with only what we call single tenant support. And like a lot of people are pointing out that there were a few of the advanced features that they would really want to see fully spec'd out and ready to also be implemented before they would consider AA useful enough. So there was something like libraries, and then also a lot of questions around the compatibility with sponsor transactions. And so we're currently like just trying to just working out the exact specifications for these features so they would also be ready. And then we had like a small issue with around transaction hash uniqueness. There was one edge case where that wasn't guaranteed, so we have two alternative fixes there as well. Yeah, and then basically for this call, our main question would be, is this EIP currently in a state where it could be moved to CFI? Obviously, with the understanding it's not considered for Berlin, and for the hard fork after, it's still very possible that people think it's not worth it. But in general, it's at least we feel like it's in a state where the pieces are there, so it's at least, yeah, it's ready for CFI. So I just would be grateful for any feedback there.
All right, does anyone have any feedback?
I'm not sure who best to address this to.
Context for CFI getting things into CFI, we've changed it to being considered for inclusion. If a PR was properly formed and it would be considered, I feel like you guys are actually even further along than you would need to be. But that would just be my. Oh no, I'm breaking up for people.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think I heard what you said. If this was to be considered for CFI, in your estimation, they are further along than other EIPs that would be going into CFI at this point or are in CFI.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then what would the process be to have it move to CFI?
It's the idea of it is if the PR was ready.
Yeah, you're totally cut out now, James. You might just
We
type
bring it
it.
up here, and then if anybody has strong feelings either way for members of
Yeah,
the field.
so I would say from the Get team regarding CFI or EFI, we cannot say. I don't think any one of us has studied this in sufficient depth to say either way, but now we're aware of it at least, so maybe in 2 weeks we can say something about it.
Okay.
Sure, sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Any other client teams want to comment? Yeah, let's all look at this for the next 2 weeks, and that'll be good. Okay, so next up, we have the YOLO/YOLO V2 and Berlin state test update. So this is going to be James, if he doesn't sound like a robot anymore.
I'm hoping I don't sound like a robot. Do I sound like a robot?
Very small amount, but it's manageable.
Yeah,
Okay.
passable robot.
Passable robot. All right. I promise I'm not a real robot yet. Just updates on the YOLO V2 from the team working on deploying it is where we start.
Okay, so let's just have a team go first. The clients that are doing YOLO V2, I believe, are Nethermind and Geth and tip of my tongue. What's the other one?
Open Ethereum.
Open Ethereum.
And Bisu.
And Besu. Let's start with like Nethermind then.
Sure. So the two APs that were being prepared for Berlin are obviously in there. I was looking at 2929, analyzing that one. I think it may be one of the more complex ones, but I'm planning like a day or two of work for this one, so hopefully soon. I was looking at 2565, I believe, so the small DEX. And I still think that the construction of the IP was not perfect for analyzing and implementing it in other clients and Geth, because there was this like Excel spreadsheet that was suggesting some libraries that were available in Go, suggesting some benchmarks that were also like Get specific benchmarks and not providing the exact numbers. I think someone responded that there is a new version of this EIP with a new number with some more details, so I'll have to look at that one. And there is 2935, which I'm super excited to implement. And the question is whether everyone else wants to go with this one in YOLO, because I think there was some 1 or 2 sessions when people are asking whether there is a champion for that, and nobody was saying anything. But I would definitely love to have this to have it implemented, and we can implement it in Nethermind and show to everyone like how it looks, how it behaves, so they can decide whether they want it in YOLO. Yeah, I think that's it, right? And the 2718, the transaction wrapper. So I prepared some bigger work to enable it, and I think this will be fine to be implemented as well. So we have like 2 out of 6, but analyzed all of them. And I think the most controversial for us is 2565, because we didn't feel like we could properly analyze it and compare it with the benchmarks.
I think Martin had a comment on the Magician's thread about having some trouble with that EIP2. That's the one that Kelly and team did.
So to make a long story short, the original one was a bit here and there, and didn't make sense. It was then reworked and modified quite recently, I think maybe last week. So it actually makes sense. And I implemented that in Geth and ran benchmarks, and my estimate was that yes, now with the changes in 2565, the benchmark results are more stable. They don't go off the charts cost-wise. So it looks like it makes sense in Geth. I can't say anything about anyone else, but I think the specification, although I know Micah has some suggestions about how to phrase it better, but I think the specification is defined enough so it can be implemented. I also thought, however, that for YOLO v2, we had already removed 2565. I thought we had removed historical block caches. I thought we had removed 2718, and we're only going with the previous 2 plus 2929 for YOLO v2.
Yeah, I had this impression last week too. And then I noticed that 6 of those appeared for YOLO v2. I mean, I'm fine to add some of them, but something definitely happened like outside of the conversation somewhere that added all of those EIPs back.
Yeah, right.
I think it could be an agenda error, actually. Are you talking about the ones listed in the agenda?
In the ones listed on this specs, the project on those specs.
Oh. Which link is that?
The agenda.
Yeah, if those are out of sync, then I might need to update them.
Okay, so
to what the consensus is.
Yeah, okay, so can we end this call so we can write it down, get a canonical what is going in, I guess, so people aren't doing too much extra work or anything?
Yep.
Okay.
So
that'd be great.
From the Besu side, yeah, I think we agree with Nethermind and Geth. It was YOLO v2 was YOLO v1 plus 2929.
And the other ones were at this point undecided, right?
So this Excel so this Excel sheet where we have listed all the clients' status, I think the EIPs considered for V2 are mentioned there, and some like 2718 possibly that is for V3. So that could be referred for like whatever was agreed on the last breakout room meeting. So it's 2 EIPs from the V1 plus 2929. And the decision, like as Martin mentioned, that for 2565, it was pending in that meeting, but now that we have clarity on it, probably we can discuss on it should be included in V2 or should be considered for V3.
So let's just briefly give a status update for Geth. We have a PR which implements the whole YOLO v2. And it appears, so I generated a random state test and produced state routes for all the tests, and we are in sync with Besu on all of those. Open Ethereum have still a couple of diffs when implementing 2929, but they're almost there, it looks like. And so we're kind of ready to go with YOLO v2 at any time. As for 2565, I personally don't think we should jam it in YOLO v2 right now. But it would be good, I think, if some other clients implemented it and checked if the benchmarks, if they look good or look bad, kind of. That's the burning question. I mean, it's not like it's for 2929, it's really lots of complexities and semantic changes, but for 2565, it's repricing, it's fairly trivial, but we need to ensure that benchmarks don't show any vulnerabilities.
And Pooja mentioned the Google Docs link in the chat. That's a really good thing to use to see where everyone's at as of the September 21st meeting. And yeah, so it looks like we have everything from YOLO V1 plus 2929 are the ones going into YOLO V2. Is that right?
Yeah. And regarding custom, by the way, Dimitri has done a lot of work on changing a bit. So when we modified the gas costs, it made some of the fillers go basically fail because they have expected post states that change. And so they need to be modified in order to generate a new set of tests. But that's coming along. Yeah, Dimitris also asked me to mention that we've had a guy who's worked on testing documentation, and he has written a couple of tutorials for generating tests and how to work with retested. So there are a bunch of them actually, and if anyone wants to, learn more about the test process and how they can use the client to generate tests, these tutorials exist.
Okay. That's interesting. So yeah, check that out. Is that just in Ethereum's organization's GitHub under testing, or is there like a repo?
Good question. It's under retested, but I cannot say right now where they are.
Okay, no problem. Retesteth is in the Ethereum organization. So if you just go there, there should be, I'm guessing, the wiki or something. If it's linked to there, it can be found. Okay, let's go over Besu now for the YOLO V2 update.
We're in the same position as Geth. We have the YOLO V1 stuff done, and we're in sync with what tests can be generated for EIP 2929.
Okay, great. And finally, Open Ethereum. Not sure if there's anyone who can update on Open Ethereum on the call, or if you're muted.
Yes, it's here. With Open Ethereum, we are, for the moment, we're not going to participate in YOLO because we don't have the enough resources to do it.
Okay, thanks for the update. Now I guess let's get YOLO V2 out the door, and then we can consider 2718 and 2565 for V3. And then there was a question of EIP 2935 needing a champion, but I thought Vitalik was the champion, or do we need someone who's more active as a champion? Was that the argument?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. I can talk to Vitalik about that and just ask if he has someone in mind. And this is 2935 champion. Okay. Yeah, I'll just put that down for something to do, I guess.
Thomas is saying in the chat that he can be the champion for 2935.
Wonderful. Okay.
Definitely happy to implement it and to convince others to have it.
Okay, cool. Starting next meeting, you can start convincing, because we're going to release V2, then start on V3, and hopefully, I'll leave it to James to kind of continue on. What's the next steps for V2 and V3 and everything?
I've been thinking about that, and I wanted to get thoughts from the group as far as, so there's the stage of doing things on a client integration test like YOLO, and then the next stage is to get it onto a test, the public test nets. I'm hoping I'm not a robot at this point. And then into mainnet. So as far as from a testing perspective, is there a way, like a testing okay perspective, saying that do we want it to go through each EIP and say this one has tested sufficiently that we should move it over, or should it be we looked at YOLO v2 and it's green light tested, or is there another even better version?
I think that the way it should go is after YOLO v2, we only have one more YOLO before going to the public test net, if we even want that third YOLO for Berlin, I guess. And at that point, we cut off what's going in or not, because we aren't adding any more EIPs to consideration for Berlin, is what it looks like. Right? Or is this list not accurate to
Yeah,
that?
I would agree. I would agree with that. My what I'm trying to is bridging the YOLO world into the mainnet world. How do we say something is ready enough to go to a testnet, and what's the process for that?
Ah, I see. Um, hmm.
Because that's the uncharted territory we're reaching at the moment.
Well, let's think about how we usually do it. We usually
And I'd also be fine with having.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say how we would usually do it is the EIPs would be haphazardly added to roadmaps to go into future hard forks, and then we would put them on the Ropsten testnet, and then other testnets like Gorley and Coven and Rinkeby would pick their dates to do their forks as well. Um, and usually Ropsten would be the first. And so I say after it's been running for at least 2 weeks on a YOLO net, I don't see why it shouldn't go into something like Ropsten once we've determined that the clients have all built out those EIPs, the ones who want to participate in the testnet fork or network upgrade or stuff like that. Which I mean, at this point would probably need to be all clients, but um, besides maybe like Trinity or others who might not want to participate at that point, it'll just depend. So all that being said, that was kind of just a long way of saying after YOLO v2, I think we should just go into Ropsten. Unless we
And I'd
want
be
more stuff
yeah, and
in.
I'd be fine. I'd be fine with YOLO v2 going into Berlin, and then YOLO v3 going into the next one.
Yeah, and we
as
can
well, like just doing it sooner and smaller pieces.
I guess counter argument would be that if we do 2929 but don't have support for access list and transactions, then we may, things will become broken between Berlin and the next one.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So maybe add that one.
I also think maybe we have like 2 or 3 EAPs that were just discussed that are kind of almost ready. And there is kind of a high fixed cost to mainnet upgrades. So if I agree, we probably shouldn't be at the spot where we're considering something brand new. But I think if something can make it into a YOLO v3 in the next 2-3 weeks, I personally would rather see like a single upgrade on mainnet where we can communicate it clearly with the stuff that's like 90% done right now, than having Berlin and then 2 months after having to communicate again that, hey, no, actually there's another upgrade with these other things. Yeah.
Do we think we could have the YOLO v3 as before the next all core devs happens?
We're not even sure what's going into v3, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we can have the v2 before the next all core dev because it's not even up yet. But I think, and then in the next all core dev, if between now and the next all core dev we can also finalize what's going into v3, then for the call after that, so like a month from now, we can probably have v3.
I think that with the current approach, we are risking this YOLO thing to grow a lot before it's being merged. Would it be better to actually decide which of the IPs are connected and cannot go by themselves, and then build various networks that would just be dedicated to those groups of VIPs that have to go together? So for example, 2929 and access list together, but 2935 would be separate, and some other things would be separate. And then when we decide that the multi-client testnet for the given EIP works, then we can move it to the testnet like Rinkeby or Gurley, and we're closer to something that we envisioned in the past of being EIP focused rather than the upgrade focused.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. I also think, Pooja, if this is your document, the one that you linked in the side, could you add a column? You could be after the meeting, but add a column for bundled or dependent, or like bundled dependent, where we link these two, the EIPs together that need to go in together to a fork. Um, that'd be a good idea to keep that straight on the document. And the only ones that are linked that I can see from this are 2929 and is access list even in here?
No, it was not. Like, as far as I remember, it was decided that it would not be getting into V2, but it would go along on the mainnet.
Oh, because it's simple enough that it wouldn't even go into a YOLO net, or?
Right.
Oh, okay. So is
I
that
guess I was under the assumption that there would be a V3 that would have 2718 and 2930.
2930 or 2935?
Sorry, 2930. That's what we were talking about here.
Yeah, for access list, it was 2930 that was supposed to get with 2929 on the mainnet.
Got it. Okay. So that's also bundled. So 2929, 2929, 2718, and 2930 are all kind of grouped up, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That is interesting. Well, we know they're not getting into V2. So there is a high cost to doing a mainnet upgrade, but at the same time, we don't want to spend forever on YOLOs. The thing that like jumps out to me though is that it seems like the implementation cost for putting 2718, 2930, and 2929 into a V3 seems low. Or if I remember correctly, all three of those EIPs I think were like low implementation cost, right? Because I think they're together.
So yeah, so for some context, these EIPs, most of them actually started bundled with other things, and in order to keep modularity in the EIPs, they were split apart. But so it's almost more of a clerical reason that they're split than an actual split.
I think we should have V3 be the last YOLO and have everything that's listed here try to go into V3, but that's my opinion. James?
I'd almost rather if we have something that's packaged and somewhat ready to ship, then I would rather us ship something smaller earlier and then ship the next one months after that, rather than keep pushing Berlin back. We need to do that, we need to do this, and then that will just continually pushing out Berlin timeline, versus we can just say now, let's do the small things we have ready, plus any security stuff that Martin had brought up. And then we can have, and so then in 2 weeks, we can decide like a fork block for Robston, basically, instead of 8 weeks from now deciding a fork block for Robston.
Anybody else have opinions on this?
I'm a bit lost on which.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Axik.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've been trying to keep track which EIPs are now part of this YOLO V2 and which aren't. but to me there seems to be two categories. One is basically the repricing of the storage and call related instructions, so 2929, and that depends on this entire transaction type EIPs as well. So I think that's one group, and they seem to need to be going together. Otherwise, a lot of people would be, I guess, disadvantaged on mainnet. And then the second category we have is repricing of precompiles, which have been outstanding for quite a bit. And I heard on this call that some clients still didn't have the time to look at those, so they don't seem to be ready. And then the last category of changes which are neither of these, which includes the new precompile, the BLS precompile. It also includes the block hash stuff, and those seem to be also a bit more out. And I'm unclear, which of these are now really close to shipping. And I would argue that the more important one would be the repricing and the transaction types around it, unless the precompile repricings are close enough, because those are kind of small to be shipped.
So what were you saying, Kelly, before we go on?
Oh yeah, I was just sort of going to agree with you, Hudson, in terms of if we could set this list as final candidates for the next hard fork. Clearly, as Axis just mentioned, some of these repricing ones have been outstanding for a number of months now. So it'd be great if we could get those in if they're relatively small changes and not delay them to the next part, official hard fork.
I see. Okay. And then Thomas, do you have a comment about either testnets or YOLO?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking that now, when I wrote in chat that people started treating YOLO as a proxy for Berlin, and they started pushing for things to go in YOLO because they are worried this is the way to have them on mainnet, like the only way. So YOLO is just like we started using different name for Berlin, really, and then it means that YOLO by itself doesn't have the meaning that it was meant to have. I think that what we can start doing is start building the multi-client testnets, which are EIP specific. And when we have all the clients agreeing and implementing a testnet and synchronizing it, then it can be approved to go to one of the major testnets that is available for users. So like Gerli, Ropsten, Rinkaby. And those EIP specific testnets should always have a bundle of EIPs that are interdependent, that cannot be going by themselves to other testnets. So they have to be together if they have dependencies. And if there are dependencies, but they are not bundled together, for example, like you can push first 2929 and 2930, but only later, or something like 2718, you can push it, and only later you can push 1559 because it will require it. It's a dependency, but it's not bundled because you can push first one of them and then the other. So they can be separate testnets, but we need to define that they are having this temporal dependency. They have to go one after another. And the other thing is the bundles that can only go together in one hard fork. So if you understand the concept, so we have the testnets where clients can decide that, oh yes, we managed to synchronize it between the clients, and there's like a few thousand blocks and everyone is synchronizing, it's fine. There are some like quick fast testing, and then you can go to a bigger testnet for users.
If we do that, would it just be a lot of like smaller hard forks that go on every month or two? In your mind, at the completion level?
Possible. I think it would enable it finally, as we were hoping for in the past, that we could actually have the proper process for EIP focused deliveries.
Mm-hmm. What does everyone else think of that, or James specifically, if you have thoughts?
I guess I'm kind of in between. I would rather just saying stuff will go into the next one and then be better about moving forward with the next one. We had kind of this lull for a while, which happened with other things beyond client work, like the break we took to talk about other core dev stuff. So it would be, but I just like to, I can hear the concerns. I want to make sure the stuff that's ready to go goes, but I don't want the stuff that's ready to go to wait for the stuff that's almost ready to go, because the list of things that are almost ready to go just increases.
If we say that list has stopped, though, and we dedicate to not putting anything else into YOLO v3 at this point, except for the ones that we've mentioned as possibilities to go into YOLO v3, that might solve that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think
maybe,
we should
but I'd
just
like to have it
be better
resolved.
at saying no.
Yeah, we can just, if we get better at saying no, then yeah, that would work, I think. What were you saying, Micah and James?
Just to echo what Thomas was saying, it sounds like YOLO v2 really means pre-Berlin now. Like originally YOLO, as I understood it, was supposed to mean, this is not Berlin. This is just stuff that is pretty easy to implement, and so we throw it out there and see how it works. Maybe it ends up in Berlin, maybe it doesn't. Who cares? But it sounds very much for this conversation like YOLO v2 or YOLO v3 is Berlin. Like that's Berlin prep. Is that correct?
It turned into
Well,
that.
it turned into
Okay.
that. I think the natural process is that stuff goes into a YOLO testnet, and we don't know if it will go into mainnet, but then we start solidifying what actually will go to mainnet through that process. So we started with a maybe things won't make it, and we end with a this is the stuff that will make it.
Yeah, and doing it in separate test nets like Thomas was suggesting is a really good idea, I think. Because then it prevents YOLO from becoming that pre-hard fork, a pre-testnet testnet that people know their stuff will get in. This first one, it was inevitable this was going to happen, though, because it's the first one. So it's kind of hard to not have all of them go in at first, I think. I think it'll be easier to say no after this if we put our mind to
and
it.
so I think I agree that maybe like if this time you want to say YOLO v3 is like the pre-Berlin, because that's kind of what we've done. I think the way to avoid that in the future is what Thomas proposed. Having single or small bundles of each test nets that people can try out, and then they can just activate one at a time. And then that means we'll still need this sort of integration step, right? Because if we want to do, say, 1559 and I don't know, 2935 in the next hard fork, you need some test net where you're trying those two together and making sure that doesn't break.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Tim. I think for this, we should put our foot down. Nothing else goes into YOLO v3. Anything that is brought up from now on has to go into v4 or later, and v3 should be Berlin.
Yeah, and can we just remove the v3? There's no v4. Like,
oh
well, v4 will be the next fork, because we'll keep working on client integration test nets, or whatever. It might not be the next fork, but it'll be the next group of VITs we're testing.
Yeah, definitely not the next fork necessarily, but the next group of VIPs being tested. And we might not even be able to call it YOLO anymore, because there'll be multiple test nets potentially with Thomas's plan if we flesh that out a little bit more offline and agree to do it.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like YOLO v3 is the last kind of multi-EEP ephemeral testnet, and then if after that we can move to like more of a single EEP or closely bundled EEPs that have to be together, then those won't all be like YOLOs. They'll be like the 1559 testnet, the 2935 testnet, and whatnot.
I like that. James,
I still need to think more. Well, I still need to think more about Thomas's and suggestion and how it fits with other things, but I think we should think about it, and then take some, because that's a change in the process, so I want to take a little bit of time.
Yeah. We don't have to decide that today, but we do need to decide. Well, we don't have to decide what's going into Berlin, but we probably should figure out like if we're putting our foot down for things not going in. Right? Like I think we are mostly in agreement with that nothing else should go into V3, right?
Yes, yeah. Let's get V3. I'm okay with that, and then I'll be better at just saying, keeping the scope down on things, and then as I think as we keep that will tend to us having more sort of hard forks.
Okay.
Because there's stuff that people want in, so then they'll want to keep going. This would be my goal.
Okay, that sounds good. So so just to make sure I understand, is the agreement for the EIPs listed on the document Puja listed plus 2718? Yeah, wait, no, that's already in there. Plus 2930, and I felt like there was one more that's not in
Can
here.
can we list the full list of what would go in V3 and V2 just to make it clear?
Yeah, so V2 we have down. That's everything from V1 plus EIP 2929, right?
Yes, and that includes the BLS precompile, if I remember correctly.
That I said V1 stuff, so that includes BLS. So V1
Yeah.
is 2315 simple subroutines. It is also EIP 2537 BLS curves. That's the V1. V2 only adds one EIP 2929 gas cost increases for state access opcodes. For V3, we would have 2718 type transaction envelope that needs to be bundled with 2935 historical wait, sorry, 2718 type transaction envelopes that needs to be bundled with the access list EIP, which I forgot the number.
2930.
2930.
2930 that also needs to be bundled with a third thing. What was that?
2565, is it?
2929.
2929.
Access list should. Yeah, we really should not do the gas replacement without access lists. Like we either
Well,
need to drop
yeah.
both. Or both.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. So 2718, 2929, and 2930 are three bundled ones for V3. And then finally, the ones that aren't bundled, but will go into V3. We have a champion for 2935, and that seems like a pretty small change. Do we want to go ahead with that for V3? I wasn't sure if was that even CFI? James, do you remember?
Sorry, which one is 35?
Save historical block hashes and state, 2935. I'm blanking on if that one even got very far in the process.
Yeah, I wonder if it did.
I know we had planned on talking about it at the breakout session a few weeks ago, but there wasn't anyone there to champion it, so I don't think it's been thoroughly discussed.
Let's leave that out for V3 as my recommendation, so we don't run into more delays since it hasn't been thoroughly discussed. Although it does have a champion now, and it can be one of the first ones to go into the whatever we decide to do after YOLO V3. And then 2565 sounds like a lot of stuff there was resolved recently, so that should go into V3, right? Or is that not resolved?
I think no. So the specification is resolved. What remains is for each client team to check if the new prices would cause problems for them.
Got it.
Or if it looks good.
Okay. So is that a recommendation from you to not put it into V3, or is that just a statement of what's going on right now?
I think we should not schedule it. I don't know. It's a bit of a recursive dilemma. So if we schedule it, we might have to take it out because it might be a denial of service on some clients. If we don't schedule it, maybe people won't do the benchmarks and we'll never find out.
I mean, on EIP 2565, those benchmarks can be done today without any changes to the gas because we know what the gas is for the test vectors, and the test vectors aren't changing. So if that's a concern, right, it seems like what we need is just, Besu and Nethermind if Open Ethereum isn't participating in these YOLO type things to just run through the existing test vectors that are already there.
Right, and then scale it by the actual postcast. They don't actually have to implement it.
Exactly.
What do others think about including this into Yellow v3 or not?
Before we go much further, there is at least there was before the bot has merged it, pending draft to adjust the numbers. And in 2537, which is BLS 1281 precompile, those were just changes to the constants, and I didn't merge them. So like people who already had also v2 implementation wouldn't need to go into the code base and adjust it once again. So I can either merge it and it goes into v2, or I can wait until v3, and it's up to developers.
Yeah, wait, I'd say.
Yeah, to make it a little easier, I'd say wait, but it's up. Yeah, it's up to devs, like you said. Okay. Um. So we're at a bit of a question mark on 2565 going into v3 or not.
I mean, on 2565, maybe is there someone from Nethermind or Besu that could commit to, if they can run the benchmark, which is, likely already in their test suite today, over this weekend, we could resolve whether it's going to be a denial of service issue for them or not. I mean, we have run the benchmarks on Open Ethereum, and the pricing was crafted explicitly to not cause those issues for Open Ethereum. They haven't been run for Besu and Nethermind, so it is work to be done, but some of them were relaxed for Open Ethereum. So the question is Nethermind or Besu going to be slower than either Geth or Open Ethereum?
Can anyone from Besu or Nethermind comment?
Yeah, I think this particular precompile most likely in Nethermind might be quite slow. I mean, that's why I'm looking at those benchmarks and trying to find the exact numbers to run it with, not to miss anything that is like the area of attack on the pricing of 2565. Why it would be potentially more expensive is because we still use the standard big integer library, and the 2565s only suggest the libraries that are not easily incorporatable into Nethermind, because I think there is a GMP library suggested, which is not on the permissive license. It's GPLv2, I guess. And the other benchmark was done with some internal call library. So maybe that one is more optimized. I think this is possible that we can rewrite it in Nethermind with the current libraries that we have, and it will work. But I need the benchmarks that give exact numbers, like so that is, I think I mentioned it already like a few months ago, and there was only this Excel spreadsheet that doesn't give the numbers. It just describes some benchmarks which are referred somewhere else.
Yeah, then I would say let's not schedule it.
There seems to be a little bit of, or not a little bit, there seems to be unknowns enough that if the client devs feel it's going to take a good amount of effort and time to resolve this, or there could be things pop up, maybe it shouldn't go into v3 like Martin's suggesting. Does Besu have an opinion?
We haven't benchmarked it either. I mean, we could in the next 2 weeks if that was kind of the main blocker. Yeah, but we don't have a strong opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would add on that is that while the GMP and OpenSSL and other libraries are recommended, those were only benchmarked because the Rust BigInt library is particularly poor performance at this operation, which is surprising. So the Go library is perfectly performant, and I would expect probably maybe not exact same performance for say the standard libraries in .NET or in Java, but I guess my point is that I don't know that it's going to require a library change for those clients, so it may really just be changing the gas pricing. And then similarly on the Besu side, as mentioned before, there's not, in terms of doing the benchmark, these test sectors should already exist in Besu, so they should be able to be run, presumably with a few commands. So it should be relatively trivial work without even changing any of the code.
Yeah, so I think that the .NET library should be very similar, either slightly worse or slightly better to the Go one. It's just the way the EIP was written, it looked like it was suggesting to move from the built-in libraries in towards GMP because they were more efficient. So I started thinking that maybe this EIP requires much more efficient libraries to be added, which would be written in C or Rust or whatever. And that's why it looks like a potentially big EIP because it requires building and testing external libraries.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that was an artifact of Rust having a particularly bad big library, or at least for this specific modular exponentiation. So, other libraries, other sort of standard libraries, we wouldn't expect that. So, a lot of that work was done, and modifications were really because of this problem with Rust. So, the goal was to not require any library changes. And it was even sort of the repricing was done in such a way to not require that on Open Ethereum either.
Okay. James, what do you think?
I mean, one thing that,
oh, go ahead,
yeah,
Kelly.
I was just going to say, I'm happy to follow up with folks from Nethermind or Besu to collect those benchmarks and, just see what the, gas per second looks like with their current implementation and the current test vectors that are already in their clients today.
I think it would be enough to clean up the EIP description and just remove what is not needed, remove what was like the work in progress and describe what it changes. I think someone was suggesting that in the discussion of the EIP is just, it doesn't like split properly what is the change and what is the history, what is the benchmark, and how do we test it?
Yeah, agreed. There is a new PR that does clarify the three changes that are needed to the gas pricing formula, which is basically a parameter change, atom max function, and then a slight change to the complexity formula. So there's a PR, and I'm happy to share that in the chat after this call.
Oops, I was on mute. Sorry. I've already heard from at least one client dev that we should probably delay this one to not put in V3. So I'm thinking we should go with that because there doesn't sound like there's a lot of assuredness about this one being, not delaying the rest of them, I think. That's kind of what I'm picking up, but it's really hard to find consensus on this one. James, did you have a comment?
I'd say basically there's 2 weeks for Kelly to resolve the client concerns, and if it doesn't happen by then it doesn't happen by then.
Okay, so V3.
Does that make sense?
So we have everything for V3 right now except for that EIP, which is now dependent on these benchmarks if they happen, right?
Yeah, and if they do happen by the next time, then I say we can do it.
Okay. So that'll be up to the client teams, and then also to Kelly's team to update the PR and communicate with the client teams how best to move forward with this. Does that sound good, Kelly?
Yeah, that works great. And then I'll work directly with those two client teams to run through and look at the benchmarks.
Cool. Yep. And you can keep us in the Ethereum. Are you in the EthRND Discord? If you're not, let me know. But yeah, there's a channel, an All Core Devs channel in there. We moved from Gitter.
Okay, great.
So next up, let's finish this one up, I should say.
Yeah, can we, sorry, I know we kind of did this already, but we just talked for another 20 minutes. So can we just get a summary of V1, or V2, V3, just to make it easier for
Sure.
folks?
So I'll try to do this. People stop and correct me if I'm wrong. In V1, we have 2315 simple subroutines and 2537 BLS 12 through 81 curve operations. For yellow V2, we have EIP 2929 gas cost increases for state access opcodes. For V3, we have EIP 2718 type transaction envelopes and EIP 2930 optional access list. And then for EIP 2935 save historical block hashes and state will not be in any YOLOs for the time being. And EIP 2565 repricing of the mod exp precompile will be determined next meeting if it is going into v3. So to summarize, we have v2 has one of the three bundled EIPs that deal with transaction types and gas cost around state access opcodes. And then v3, and then v3 has the other two of that three EIP bundle, which is 2718 and 2930. 2565, the repricing of the mod exp precompile, will be decided next time if it's going into v3. And then, is that accurate? Anybody?
Hudson, question.
Yeah.
One of the outcomes of the previous call was that we did not want to put 2539 into YOLO v2, but left the door open for things after that. Is 2539 also on this list, or should I plan on delaying that work until after v3 as well?
I would say delay it till after v3, but James and others, what do you think?
Yeah, the context of last time was that v3 would be post-Berlin stuff, but now it's kind of v3 is getting us closer to Berlin. So it would be whatever's after that.
Okay.
Yeah, I keep working on it.
All right.
Yeah,
great.
We're standing up a testnet for it ourselves.
Thanks, James.
That's great.
Or thanks both Jameses, but mostly Prestwich.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Is everyone clear on what? Okay, Pooja just asked a question. What was the question? It was 2711. Oh, did we not go over that one?
That was also, in my mind, was supposed to be bundled together. So, do we have any decision for that EIP? It's already in CFI.
It is CFI, but there was some issues people brought up with it, particularly with the batch transactions piece, and then some minor issues with the expiring transactions. So most likely, one of the breakout sessions we discussed it, most likely what will happen is we'll split that out, and the first piece of that will go in will be sponsored transactions. I don't think there's anything that's pressing enough that it needs to go into Berlin. It's basically UX improvements, and so I'm guessing that at this point it probably will not make it. Unless someone else wants to push hard for it. I'm not going to push hard for it for Berlin.
Okay.
I don't want to push super hard, but I do feel like smart contract devs are continuing to rack up debt by using meta transactions. And so the sooner that we can give them some sort of layer one escape hatch from that is the best.
Okay. Noted.
Yeah, that is very true. There are like 6 EIPs people have drafted for meta transaction standards, and on every single one of them, I tell them, "Hey, this is going to be obsolete as soon as we get this in." And they're like, "Yeah, but I don't know how long it's going to be." So they keep building stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if we had a clear schedule for when the next hard fork would be, I would be happier to say, let's just wait a second till this next one in 4 or 5 months. But it could be June or later for the next hard fork, and then we've spent another 8 to 10 months of smart contract devs developing smart contracts and meta transaction systems that are going to be obsolete once we have this reach layer one.
I understand the concern, but we do have to kind of go in order, and the first one is resolving the issues that Micah outlined. So with those resolved, we'd be able to better indicate if it's going into future ephemeral test nets, and then from there when it's going into a fork, I guess.
So if there's desire to get sponsored transactions specifically by itself in, I could have that extracted out into a separate EIP within a couple of days. I think by early next week, I would say. If there's drive. If there's not, then that's low priority for me.
Yeah, I've talked to a handful of people building these meta transaction systems, and it seems like batching transactions is a pretty critical element. So I think that sponsored transactions alone, if that's the best that we can do, it may not make sense to do on its own.
Okay. Yeah, batching. There's some serious. I think it was the Geth team that mentioned it, but I think other teams reiterated that batch transactions create a bunch of complexity in the clients that people wanted to avoid. And also it overlaps with rich transactions and account abstraction, which are also going in. So it gets hard and complicated, especially with the timeline on Berlin. That seems much less likely, if that's a requirement.
Yeah, I'm planning to implement some derivation of 2711 over the next few weeks. So hopefully maybe by the next meeting can have a little bit more insight to what that may actually look like on an implementation standpoint.
So which one specifically? Are you talking about batched?
Yeah, I'm thinking of doing the batched and the sponsored transactions as one implementation.
So the problem with batched isn't so much what the implementation will look like. The problem we see is more like theoretical. That you, in order to verify the batch, right now, if there is a transaction which consumes 1 million gas, it either works or it doesn't, and it charges something. But if you have a batch and you execute 10 transactions, and then eventually find out that no, the total batch cannot be included in a block because the 10th transaction cannot be executed because number 9 burned the remaining value or something like that.
So I mean, I think like the idea was that each of these transactions in this batch would specify their own gas limits, and then the overall batch would specify some gas price and a signer who is basically saying that they will pay for this entire batch of transactions. And all that needs to be done to validate it is they need to go through and verify the signature for each of those transactions if it's not the same as the overall sender.
Right, but they can have interplay effects, right? So if one of the transactions makes a later transaction invalid, then they all need to be, because you want them to be applied atomically, right?
Well, how can you make a later transaction invalid? Because we can already verify in constant time if the transaction is valid. So that means we should therefore be able to verify in constant time if all of the transactions are valid.
I think there's a miscommunication here. So there's 2 ways we can go about this. One is the entire thing is atomic. It either all the batch succeeds or all the batch fails. The other way is it's not atomic, meaning that each individual transaction will succeed or fail on its own, and they will charge gas separately. If I remember correctly, there's a separate problem if you go with the latter, which is I think what the client's talking about, where you're not atomic. But I don't remember what the problem was. I guess brought it up. I don't know if you remember, Martin.
I think we're getting kind of closer to the end of the call, so it might be just from a YOLO V2, V3 perspective that there's more work that needs to be done than it can for this time. But if the next fork is in June, I don't think we're doing things correctly. So I would much rather it be Q1 of next year.
There's a separate problem if you go with the latter, which is I think what the client's talking about.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it'll be
either way.
June.
There's stuff to figure out.
Okay, we can take this offline. I can spend a little time and think through some of these edge cases as well.
Okay, thanks. Okay, is everyone clear on what's going into YOLO V2 and V3? And we will have this in the notes and updated in the chart, I'm guessing. That might already be worked on, actually.
Yep. Well,
yeah, and I'll create separate tabs for YOLO V1, V2, V3, all 3 together in this Excel sheet. That would be helpful for people to track it.
Thank you. The sheet's really well done, everybody who'd worked on it. I don't know who worked on it. I'm guessing it was Pooja and James. Next up, I had light client comments on a few EIPs, and we've already gone over all of them, I think, except for maybe the status of 2584.
Yeah, that's right.
That was Guillaume, and he's not here to talk about that. Did you have an update light client, or were you just wondering?
I mean, I am wondering what the status of the binary trie migration is, and then I'm generally just curious to know what people are thinking is the status of stateless Ethereum in general, because I think that it's an important thing to have before we have phase 1.5, which is potentially going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. And stateless Ethereum has been in progress for about at least a year now, and it seems like it's really cooled down in the last 4 or 5 months. And I was just wondering if anyone has more insight into why that is and how we can reinvigorate it.
So one thing that I'd say about that is that the primary people working on that would be the Quilt team, right?
I don't think the Quill team is the primary people working on it. I think the primary people who were working on it were, Piper was sort of leading that effort.
That's
and
right.
So there was a lot of work that Piper was helping coordinate around the witness spec. I think there was someone from TurboGuest, and maybe Paul Derzansky spent a little time on the witness spec. And then obviously Guillaume has spent some time on the binary trie migration. But to me, it appears that a lot of this work is like reaching the point where it's getting solidified and it's starting to broach into, getting it through governance. And I'm not seeing what the clear path is. Like, we have an ETH that says how to go from Patricia Merkle tree to a binary tree, but there's no one who's coming here to, ask what are the next steps,
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that we're going to go 6 months down the line without this happening. And then, phase 1.5 is going to be right around the corner. And we're going to get into a situation where we're going to ship phase 1.5 and every ETH2 validator has to be a full ETH1 node, which, there's concerns around that.
Yeah. I understand. I think talking to Piper would be the best bet because I know he was at one time, like you mentioned, leading it up. See if that's why that's dropped off. And yeah, I'd be interested to hear why it's dropped off myself, but I don't know if we'll have any answers today, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
Yeah. That was a very interesting piece of research, though, that I'd be super curious to hear where the full status is of it.
As far as I'm aware, they're still working on it. We just don't have the
Oh, you're muted, James. You just talked and then got muted.
right people on the call to give updates. Oh, that the work is ongoing. We just don't have people on the call to give an update on it.
Is there anyone on the call who has like better direct communications with these people and to ask them to come to the next meeting or start coming to meetings a little bit more regularly?
Yep. Guillaume is on the guest thing. I can ask him to join.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. We have about 6 minutes left. There's nothing else on the agenda. Did I miss anything? Is there other discussion points or updates? Ansgar, you had a comment. Oh, that was just a comment. I thought it was a question, maybe. Just about the... yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say there was some concerns about how to best combine AA and sponsor transactions. Obviously, I don't want to kind of hold up the progress on sponsor transactions. Just something I will be looking into over the next few weeks to figure out, to just make sure there's no duplicated effort there. That's all.
Okay, great. Is there any other updates from anybody or discussion topics? Okay, looks like we can probably end this one early. I do want to mention that I'm starting to brainstorm ways to improve the All Core Devs call and just our processes in general, so we're not like starting to get known as the Bitcoin, ossifying, very slow, never does anything layer. So I think that I'll start pulling people in, and if you're interested in being involved in that, reach out to me. But I'll pull in some people to kind of help brainstorm around some of that. But if you have good ideas about how to make the meeting better, or feedback for myself or for James or others who usually play a bigger role in the call, please reach out. We love feedback. Hurt my feelings. Let me know where I'm doing bad. Hit me up. All right, The next call is going to be October 16th at 1400 UTC. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great day.
Cheers. Thanks, Hudson.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
Bye.
Cheers.